The late afternoon sun burned low on the horizon, staining the Georgia sky in deep streaks of orange and crimson. The two-lane highway stretched endlessly ahead, flanked by towering pines that whispered with the wind. Alex Carter gripped the leather steering wheel of her midnight blue Ford Mustang, tapping her fingers against it in rhythm with the classic rock humming from the radio. It had been a long day, 8 grueling hours in federal court, testifying against one of the biggest drug traffickers in the Southeast. She was drained, her body craving nothing but a hot shower and 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. But something was off. She sensed it before she saw it, that familiar unease crawling up her spine. A black and white patrol car had been lingering in her rear view for the past 5 miles. No lights, no sirens. Just sitting there, watching. Alex exhaled slowly. She knew this game. Small-town cops with too much ego and too little oversight, looking for someone to flex their authority over. Out-of-state plates? Female driver alone? She fit the bill. Still, she kept her speed steady at 55 miles per hour, right on the limit. Then, like clockwork, red and blue lights exploded behind her. She sighed. Here we go. Pulling over onto the gravel shoulder, she cut the engine, both hands on the wheel. Muscle memory, training. Years in law enforcement had drilled it into her. Stay calm, stay in control. Give them nothing. The crunch of boots against gravel sent a chill through her. 2 officers. One tall and cocky, the other older, heavier. Predators in uniform. She kept her face unreadable as the taller one leaned down, tapping the window. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his smirk a slow, practiced thing. "License and registration." Alex handed over her license and registration without a word, her pulse steady. The taller cop, Deputy Logan Reese, barely glanced at them before tilting his head. "You in a hurry tonight?" "Nope," she said, her tone even. "You didn't see that stop sign a few miles back?" A deliberate accusation. Setting the stage, Alex didn't blink. There was no stop sign. Reese's smirk widened, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Step out of the vehicle. And there it was. The escalation. She stayed still, her grip tightening slightly on the wheel. On what grounds? The second cop, Deputy Mark Connolly, shifted, his gut stretching the buttons of his tan uniform. "We'll discuss that outside the car," he said, voice thick with authority. Alex breathed in slow, controlled, resisting the urge to laugh. They weren't just looking for an excuse. They already had a plan. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out, boots crunching against the gravel. Connolly moved behind her, his fingers resting near his taser. "Turn around," he ordered. Alex tilted her head. "Excuse me?" "You heard him," Reese said, taking a step closer. "Hands behind your back." She almost rolled her eyes. "So predictable. You got drugs in that car, don't you?" Reese added, his smirk deepening. Alex held his gaze, her expression blank. "You're joking, right?" Neither of them smiled. "I'm a federal agent," she said, voice even. "My badge is in my—" Connolly grabbed her wrist. Instinct kicked in. Alex yanked back before she could stop herself. Reese's face darkened. "That's assault on an officer." "That's assault on a federal officer," she corrected, her voice like steel. But they weren't listening. Reese tapped his radio. "Dispatch, we got a possible trafficker here, requesting K-9. Alex's jaw tightened. They were setting her up. Alex couldn't believe the audacity. She had dealt with drug lords, cartel enforcers, and undercover sting operations that would make most men fold. But these two? A couple of backwoods, small-town cops thinking they could outplay a federal agent? Now that was funny, but she didn't laugh. Instead, she let out a slow, measured breath, playing along. For now, Reese strutted toward her car, tapping the trunk like he was a game show host about to unveil a prize. "Let's see what we got here," Connolly stood too close behind Alex, his breath smelling like stale coffee and bad decisions. Then came the moment she expected. Reese whistled low. Well, look at this. Alex didn't need to turn around. She already knew. They had planted something, probably a vacuum-sealed brick of whatever they confiscated off the last poor soul they pulled this stunt on. Connolly clicked his tongue, shaking his head like he was disappointed in her choices. Damn shame, ma'am. Alex tilted her head, feigning curiosity. Really? What is it? A treasure chest? A winning lottery ticket? Reese grinned, holding up a plastic-wrapped package. Kilos, and from the looks of it, real pure. She nodded thoughtfully. Wow, you two must be so proud of yourselves. Reese's smirk faltered, just a little. What was that? Alex leaned in slightly, voice smooth. I mean, planting evidence and setting people up takes real effort. But I gotta ask, did you rehearse this routine, or is it improv night? Connolly bristled. Watch your mouth. Or what? Alex deadpanned. Reese stepped closer. Or you'll be rotting in a cell before sunrise. She finally smiled. Oh, sweetheart, that's adorable. But see, here's the thing. She lifted her chin, her voice laced with amusement. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Alex sat in the holding cell, legs stretched out, back against the cold cinder block wall. The air smelled like old sweat, stale cigarettes, and poor life choices. Across from her, a young black man, early 20s, sat slouched against the bars. His face was a cocktail of exhaustion and frustration, a fresh bruise blooming along his cheekbone. You knew? He asked, voice flat. Alex smirked. Something like that. The guy chuckled bitterly. Let me guess, Reese and Connolly? She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Didn't need to. Yeah, he exhaled. They got me too. Alex tilted her head. For what? He scoffed, shaking his head. Oh, you know, breathing while existing. His jaw tightened. Said my taillight was out. By the time we got here, they'd found a suspicious amount of cash on me. Alex's eyes flickered with understanding. And by found, you mean it disappeared into their pockets. He let out a hollow laugh. Been saving for months. I work at a damn warehouse, but tell that to them. Alex inhaled slowly, her rage curling into something focused. This wasn't just a one-time thing. These two weren't sloppy, they were professionals. This was a business model. How long you been in here? She asked. 3 days, he muttered. No call, no lawyer. My mom doesn't even know where I am. Alex's pulse ticked up. 3 days. Long enough for paperwork to get lost, long enough for evidence to appear. She sat up, rolling her shoulders. Enough waiting. From down the hall, the heavy thud of approaching boots echoed off the walls. Reese and Connolly. The kid beside her stiffened. Alex? She just smiled. Showtime. The cell door clanged open, the sharp metallic echo bouncing off the walls. Reese stood on the other side, arms crossed, looking like he just won the lottery. Connolly loomed behind him, his usual scowl in place. How's it feel, sweetheart? Reese drawled, tapping the bars with his knuckle. Alex stretched, rolling out the stiffness in her shoulders. Oh, you know. 5-star accommodations, gourmet meals, top-tier customer service. Really, I'm impressed. Reese's smirk twitched. You're real mouthy for someone about to disappear into the system. Alex leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. And you're real cocky for someone about to have the worst day of his life, Connolly scoffed. You still don't get it, do you? Reese gestured lazily. You think your little badge means something here? This ain't the big leagues, sweetheart. No feds, no fancy lawyers. Around here, we make the rules. Alex's smirk widened. That so? Oh, that's so, Reese said, confidence oozing off him. Then outside the station came the unmistakable sound of screeching tires. A beat. Then Reese's radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, we got federal agents at the front entrance. They're asking for an Alex Carter." Reese froze, his face draining of color. Connolly's jaw clenched so tight Alex thought he might crack a molar. She stood up, casually dusting off her jeans, then walked up to the bars, tilting her head. "You were saying?" Reese grabbed his radio. "Who the hell called the feds?" Alex grinned. "I didn't have to." Before Reese could spit out another threat, the front doors of the station slammed open. Boots on tile. Loud, purposeful. Then came the voice. "Where the hell is my agent?" Reese looked like he swallowed a golf ball. "Alex?" She just smiled. Game over. The tension in the room thickened like a thundercloud. Reese and Connolly stood frozen, their once smug expressions now resembling deer caught in headlights. Through the station's front doors strode Deputy Director Sam Nolan, a man who could make a room go silent just by existing. His suit was sharp, his eyes sharper, and his patience non-existent. Behind him, 2 U.S. Marshals followed, their faces unreadable, their hands hovering near their holsters. Nolan's gaze locked onto Reese. "Uncuff her." Neither officer moved. "I said," Nolan repeated, his voice dropping to lethal levels, "uncuff her, now." Connolly swallowed hard, fumbling for his keys as he unlocked Alex's cuffs. She rubbed her wrists, giving Reese a slow, knowing smile. "You planted it," Nolan continued, voice razor-sharp. Reese's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, he had nothing to say. A U.S. Marshal stepped forward, badge glinting. "We're escorting her to federal court. If either of you obstructs that, I'll be adding to your charges." "Charges?" Connolly sputtered. "What the hell are you talking about?" Nolan folded his arms. "Oh, let me spell it out for you. You illegally detained a federal agent, falsified evidence, and violated her constitutional rights." His eyes darkened. "You 2 morons are looking at felony charges before the day is over." Reese went pale. "This is a mistake." Nolan smirked. "Oh, I agree. The mistake was thinking you could get away with it." With a metallic clink, Alex's cuffs hit the floor. She stepped past Reese, pausing just long enough to whisper, "I told you you'd regret it." Then, without another word, she walked out, leaving them to drown in their own mess. Checkmate. The courtroom smelled like old wood and bad coffee, the kind of place where men like Reese and Connolly thought they were untouchable. Alex sat at the defendant's table, calm, composed, letting the weight of the moment settle in. Across the room, Reese and Connolly sat stiffly with their lawyer, local defense attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge, an older man with silver hair and a no-nonsense expression, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Let's begin." The prosecutor stood first, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, the state has charged Miss Carter with drug trafficking, possession with intent to distribute, and resisting arrest." Alex barely reacted. She wanted them to feel comfortable to believe, for just a second longer, that they were in control. The judge turned to her. "Miss Carter, do you have legal representation?" Alex leaned forward. "That won't be necessary, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the room. The prosecutor frowned. The judge nodded slowly. "Very well. How do you plead?" Alex smiled. "Before I answer that, Your Honor, I'd like to present something to the court." She reached into a file folder and pulled out a laminated ID, walking it over to the bailiff. He passed it to the judge, who studied it, his eyebrows lifting. The prosecutor leaned forward, confused. "What is that?" The judge set the ID down with a sigh, then turned to Reese and Connolly. "This is a federal badge. Silence." He faced the officers. "Miss Carter is a special agent with the D." Reese turned ghost white. Alex's voice was smooth. "That's correct, Your Honor. And if the prosecution wants to continue pressing charges against a federal agent who is framed by 2 corrupt officers," she folded her arms, "I'll be happy to proceed." The prosecutor's face twisted in panic. "Your Honor, The judge cut him off with a raised hand. Then he looked at Reese and Connolly, his expression cold. "Officers, would you like to explain yourselves?" Reese opened his mouth, then shut it. For the first time, he realized he wasn't in control anymore. The courtroom was dead silent. Reese and Connolly sat stiff as corpses, their faces drained of color. Their once smug confidence had evaporated like cheap whiskey on hot pavement. The judge leaned forward, staring them down. "Would you like to explain yourselves?" Reese's jaw twitched. "Your Honor, we were acting on probable cause." Alex laughed, a sharp, biting sound. "Probable cause?" She repeated, tilting her head. "You had nothing. You pulled me over because you thought you could get away with it." The judge's expression hardened. He turned to the prosecutor. "I assume you'll be dropping all charges?" The prosecutor, looking like he just swallowed a lemon whole, nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good." The judge shifted his focus back to Alex. "Agent Carter, you're free to go." Alex didn't sit back down. Instead, she turned toward Reese and Connolly, who were clutching the edges of the table like it might save them from drowning. "Now," she said, her voice smooth as glass, "let's talk about what happens to dirty cops who frame innocent people." The courtroom buzzed. Reese's face darkened. "You can't do this." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Oh, but I can." She reached into a folder on the prosecutor's desk and pulled out a bank statement. "See, you two aren't just bad cops," she said, flipping the pages. "You're stupid ones." She held up the evidence. "The FBI ran an emergency audit of your accounts the second I called in." Reese's breathing hitched. "And guess what?" Alex smirked. "Your checking accounts tell a very interesting story." She tapped the paper. "Big deposits. Too big for a small-town cop's salary. Thousands of dollars coming in all from shell companies linked to drug operations." The prosecutor snatched the papers, his face twisting in horror. Alex's voice was cold, controlled. "You weren't just framing people." She leaned in, watching Reese's panic unfold. "You were getting paid to do it." The courtroom erupted. The courtroom was chaos. Reese and Connolly looked like men standing at the edge of a cliff, realizing too late that the ground beneath them was crumbling. The prosecutor stared at the bank statements, his face a mixture of rage and embarrassment. This is insane," he muttered. "I had no idea." Alex turned to him, her gaze sharp. "Did you even ask?" she said, voice steady. "When they brought me in, did you stop and think for 1 second that something didn't add up? Or did you just take their word for it?" The prosecutor stiffened, shifting uncomfortably. Alex leaned forward, voice low but firm. "You didn't ask questions. You saw a charge sheet and rubber-stamped it, and that's the problem." She let the weight of her words settle. "How many others have you done that to?" The prosecutor opened his mouth and shut it. I'm not." Alex held up a hand. "I'm not looking for an answer." She studied him for a long moment. "But you should be." The room fell silent. The lesson was clear. Justice isn't about convenience. It's about truth. The judge exhaled heavily, shaking his head. "We'll be taking this matter to a federal review board, effective immediately." Reese and Connolly were pale, frozen, their power officially gone. Alex turned away from them, glancing toward the young man she had met in the holding cell. His charges had been dropped, his record wiped clean. But his expression said everything. This wasn't just about today. How many more? He muttered, almost to himself. Alex met his gaze. "Too many," she admitted. "But not today." She adjusted her badge, stepping toward the exit. Today they lost. The courthouse doors swung open, and Alex stepped into the crisp evening air. The sun had dipped below the tree line, leaving streaks of gold and violet across the sky. She inhaled deep. Freedom had a scent. Behind her, the courtroom was still buzzing. Reese and Connolly were in custody now, their careers and their illusions of power shattered. But this wasn't just about two dirty cops. This was about a system that let them thrive. Deputy Director Sam Nolan stood beside her, hands in his pockets, his usual no-nonsense demeanor softened just a fraction. "They'll be in federal custody by morning," he said. "The prosecutor's office is scrambling, trying to distance themselves from this mess." Alex smirked. "They should be. This isn't just about Reese and Connolly. It's about every case they touched." She looked back toward the courthouse steps, where the young man from the holding cell stood, watching. His record was clear, his freedom restored, but his face still held traces of anger. Alex understood. He had lost 3 days of his life. And how many others never got those days back? She stepped toward him, voice calm. "They won't do this again." He studied her. "But someone else will." A beat. She nodded. "Yeah, probably." He exhaled, running a hand over his face. "So what now?" Alex adjusted her badge, eyes steady. "Now?" she said. "We make sure the next Reese and Connolly think twice before trying this again." She turned toward Nolan's black SUV, the courthouse shrinking behind her. Some people think power protects them. Some people think they're untouchable. But justice sends a message. No one is above the law. And for those who thought otherwise, they'd find out soon enough.